Before we dive into tonight's tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want more creepy stories that will keep you up at night. It was just another night in Las Vegas, the kind where the air's thick with cigarette smoke and desperation, when everything went dark. Not just a flicker, mind you, but a full-on blackout that swallowed the city whole. 1 minute, the Strip was a screaming neon circus, blues and reds bouncing off every glass surface, and the next, it was like someone flipped the world's biggest light switch. People froze mid-step, drinks halfway to their lips, as this low, buzzing hum cut through the silence. Then the emergency alert system kicked in, that harsh staticky tone blaring from every phone and TV screen in the Mirage Casino. Power failure due to solar flare. Stay indoors. The voice was robotic, calm in a way that made your skin crawl, like it didn't care how bad things were about to get. Inside the Mirage, chaos erupted fast. Eddie Voss was up on stage, this 50-year-old magician who'd seen better days. Think faded velvet jacket, hair slicked back with too much gel, hands trembling just a bit as he shuffled his deck. He'd been mid-trick, trying to pull a rabbit out of a hat for a half-drunk crowd when the lights died. The rabbit, some scruffy little thing named Houdini, thumped against the hat's lining, and Eddie fumbled, dropping the whole damn thing. Cards scattered across the stage, the hat rolled into the shadows, and the crowd didn't even boo. They just bolted. Chairs scraped against the carpet. Someone knocked over a table, and you could hear the clatter of poker chips hitting the floor as people shoved toward the exits. Eddie stood there, squinting into the dark, muttering, "Well, hell, that's my finale ruined," like it was just another Tuesday. Over by the bar, Lila Torres was having her own mess of a night. She's 28, all sharp edges and tired eyes, a cocktail waitress who'd been slinging drinks for hours in heels that pinched her toes raw. She'd been balancing a tray of martinis, 3 olives each because the high rollers were picky, when the blackout hit. Her phone was buzzing in her apron pocket, probably her babysitter texting about Sophie, her 6-year-old daughter waiting back at their cramped apartment off the Strip. Lila yanked the phone out, saw the EAS alert, and her stomach dropped. "Stay indoors? How am I supposed to get home?" She snapped to no one, her voice cutting through the din. The tray slipped from her hands then, crashing down with a sound like a gunshot. Glass shattered, gin splashed across her sneakers, and she kicked at the mess, swearing under her breath. $8 an hour, and now this crap. Meanwhile, Ray, Lucky Callahan, didn't budge. He's 40, wiry, with a gambler's hunch in his shoulders and a face that looked like it'd been punched one too many times. Debt was his shadow. He owed half the bookies in Vegas. But right then, he was parked at a slot machine, the one with the busted jackpot sign flickering even before the power cut. When the lights went out, he just leaned closer, squinting at the reels like they owed him something. "Come on, baby. One more spin," he muttered, fishing a crumpled dollar from his pocket. The machine was dead, but Ray didn't care. He slapped the button anyway, grinning like a kid who'd just found a loophole. Around him, people were screaming, tripping over each other. But Ray? He was in his own little world, waiting for luck to finally show up. Marcus Dunn, though, he was the one keeping things from falling apart, or trying to. He's 35, built like a linebacker, with a security guard uniform that was a size too tight across the chest. His face was all stone, but his eyes kept darting, like he knew something the rest of them didn't. The second the blackout hit, he'd moved fast, boots thudding across the casino floor as he shoved past the fleeing crowd. "Doors are locked, folks. Stay put," he barked, his voice deep and steady, cutting through the panic. He reached the main entrance, a big glass wall overlooking the Strip, and slammed the deadbolts home with a clang that echoed. His hands lingered on the metal, fingers flexing, and if you looked close, you'd see the sweat beading on his forehead. Marcus wasn't just locking them in, he was locking something out. Outside, the Strip was turning into a nightmare. These glowing figures started showing up, drifting down the street like they owned it. They weren't human, not even close. Their faces were too bright to look at, like someone had cranked the contrast on a TV screen to max. You couldn't see eyes or mouths, just this searing white light that made your head throb if you stared too long. A tourist, some guy in a Hawaiian shirt, probably 3 beers deep, stumbled up to the glass doors, pounding on them with meaty fists. "Let me in, man. They're out here," he yelled, his voice cracking. Marcus stepped back, jaw tight, but before he could even answer, one of those glowing things glided up behind the guy. It didn't walk. It floated, smooth and silent, like a shadow sliding across water. Its hand, or whatever you'd call it, brushed the tourist's shoulder, and he just dropped. No scream, no twitch, just a thud as he hit the pavement, eyes wide and empty. A thin wisp of smoke curled up from where it touched him, and the air smelled like burnt metal. Inside, the EAS crackled again, the message garbling like a bad radio signal. "Hide from the lights," it stuttered, then cut out with a sharp pop. Lila froze, her hand halfway to her mouth, while Eddie shuffled off the stage, kicking aside his spilled props. "What the hell does that mean?" he grumbled, brushing dust off his jacket. Ray, though, he perked up at something else. His slot machine, dead as a doornail a second ago, whirred to life, just for a split second. The reels spun, clicked, and spat out a single coin that rolled across the floor. Ray snatched it up, quick as a cat, and held it to the dim emergency light. "Well, I'll be damned," he chuckled, turning it over in his fingers. Stamped on the surface was a name, Hawaiian Shirt Guy, or at least that's what Ray called him later. He pocketed it, that grin of his stretching wider, like he'd just won the night. Above them, the chandeliers started to move. Not just sway, but twist, the crystals clinking together in a slow, deliberate rhythm. It wasn't the wind. There was no breeze in here, just the stale hum of recycled air. Eddie glanced up, his brow furrowing as he tugged at his collar. "That's not normal," he said, half to himself, half to whoever was listening. Lila stepped closer to Marcus, her sneakers squeaking on the wet floor, her voice low but sharp. "What's out there, huh? You locked us in here. Tell me that guy didn't just die for nothing." Marcus didn't answer right away. He just stared out the glass, watching those glowing figures drift closer, their hum filling the air like a song you couldn't shake. The night was only getting started, and already it felt like the casino was waking up around them. The air inside the Mirage was getting heavier, like the casino itself was holding its breath. Eddie Voss wiped his sweaty palms on his velvet jacket, the faint jingle of loose change in his pocket cutting through the quiet. He'd climbed down from the stage by now, his boots scuffing the carpet as he edged toward the little cluster of people near the doors. "We can't just stand here like sitting ducks," he said, his voice rough from years of shouting over crowds. He waved a hand toward the darkened casino floor, the rows of slot machines looming like silent sentinels. "Those things out there, they're not waiting for an invitation. We need to move, find somewhere they can't get to us." Lila Torres spun on him, her ponytail whipping around as she jabbed a finger at Marcus. "Move where, huh? This genius locked us in." Her voice cracked, sharp and jagged, like she was one bad minute away from losing it completely. She stepped closer to Marcus, her sneakers leaving little wet smears from the spilled gin, and planted herself right in front of him. "Unlock those doors now. I've got a kid out there. Sophie's waiting for me, and I'm not leaving her to deal with whatever this is alone." Her hands balled into fists, trembling at her sides, and you could see the panic flickering in her eyes, the kind that comes when a mom's whole world is on the line. Marcus didn't flinch, though. He stood there, arms crossed over his broad chest, the security badge on his shirt glinting faintly under the emergency lights. "You didn't see what I saw," he said, his tone flat but firm, like he was stating a fact nobody could argue with. "That guy out there? He's gone. You step outside, you're next. We're safer in here." His jaw tightened, and he shifted his weight, the leather of his boots creaking as he glanced back at the glass doors. The tourist's body was still sprawled out there, one arm twisted at a weird angle, and those glowing figures were drifting closer, their light pulsing like a heartbeat. Ray Lucky Callahan, though, he wasn't buying any of it. He was still slouched by his slot machine, one elbow propped on the armrest, flipping that weird coin he'd snagged between his fingers. "Safer? Man, you're all nuts," he said, letting out a dry, raspy laugh that echoed a little too loud in the empty casino. "I'm not going anywhere. This baby's about to pay out. I can feel it. Jackpot's coming, and I'm not missing it for some light show." He tapped the machine with his knuckles, a dull thunk-thunk, and leaned back like he was settling in for the night. The coin caught the light as he flipped it again, and he smirked, oblivious to the way the chandeliers above were still swaying, their crystals clinking like wind chimes in a storm. Marcus shot him a look, then held up a hand, his voice dropping low. "Quiet down, all of you. Listen." The group froze, and that's when they heard it, a faint hum, like a chorus of voices too far off to make out. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere, seeping through the walls, vibrating in the floor. Eddie tilted his head, squinting into the shadows, while Lila clutched her apron, her breath hitching. Then they saw them, those glowing figures from outside, sliding right through the walls like the casino was made of smoke. They didn't walk. They glided, smooth and slow, their blinding faces casting sharp beams across the room. That eerie tune they hummed grew louder, a melody that didn't belong in any song you'd ever heard, all dissonant notes and whispers. One of them drifted closer to Lila, its light washing over her face, and it stopped, hovering just a foot away. She stumbled back, her heel catching on a chair leg, and then it spoke. Just one word, soft and clear as a bell. "Sophie." Lila's scream ripped through the room, raw and desperate, and she swung her arms like she could bat the thing away. No, you don't get to say her name," she yelled, tears streaking down her cheeks. Eddie lunged forward, grabbing her by the elbow and yanking her back just as the figure reached out with a glowing hand. She crashed into him, panting, and he steadied her, muttering, "Easy, kid, I got you," even though his own hands were shaking. Ray, still lounging by his machine, perked up like this was all a game. "Hey, shiny, catch!" he called, flicking that coin he'd pocketed straight at the figure. It spun through a beam of light, glinting gold, and here's the wild part, the thing caught it. Mid-air, no effort, like it'd been waiting for the toss. The coin flared red-hot in its grip, sizzling like bacon on a skillet, and then it was gone, just a puff of smoke curling up where it'd been. Ray cackled, slapping his thigh. "See? They're not so tough, probably just jealous of my luck." But his laugh died quick when the figure turned its head, or whatever passed for a head, toward him, and the hum in the air sharpened, almost angry. Marcus stepped forward, his flashlight clicking on with a faint buzz as he swept the beam across the room. "Enough," he snapped, his voice cutting through the noise. "We're not safe here. Follow me, security office is down the hall. It's got reinforced walls, cameras, maybe we can figure this out." He hesitated, then added, quieter, I've seen stuff like this before. Back when they built this place, people went missing, workers mostly. I filed the reports, but management told me to bury them, said it was bad for business." His eyes flicked to the floor, and you could tell that confession cost him something, like he'd been carrying it around too long. Lila glared at him, wiping her face with her sleeve. "You knew? And you didn't say anything?" she hissed, but Eddie tugged her arm again. "Yell at him later. Let's go." They started moving, Marcus leading the way with his flashlight bobbing, Eddie and Lila close behind, Ray trailing with a grumble about leaving his lucky spot. The casino felt alive now, the air buzzing with that hum, and as they passed a poker table tucked in an alcove, something made them stop. The cards on the green felt were moving, shuffling themselves, slow and deliberate, the slap of paper against paper loud in the silence. They slid into a neat row, one by one, and when Marcus swung his light over them, each card had a name scratched into it in jagged letters. Lila said Taurus, Ray said Lucky, Eddie's, Guilty. He stared at it, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard, and muttered, "Real funny." They kept going, the beam of Marcus's flashlight bouncing off the walls, and that's when they noticed the mirrors. The big gaudy ones lining the hall, the kind Vegas loves to slap everywhere to make the place feel bigger. Except now, they didn't show the group trudging along. No Lila, no Eddie, no Marcus or Ray. Just the glowing figures, dozens of them, their light bleeding through the glass like they were standing right behind the reflections. Eddie stopped short, his breath fogging the mirror as he leaned in close. "Where the hell are we?" he whispered, but the hum was getting louder, closer, and Marcus grabbed his shoulder. "Keep moving," he said, voice tight. "Office is just ahead." The figures didn't follow, not yet, but their light lingered, painting the walls in streaks of white, and that tune kept playing, worming its way into their heads as they hurried down the hall. The group stumbled out of that mirrored hallway, Marcus's flashlight beam slicing through the dark as they spilled into the VIP lounge. It was one of those swanky spots in the Mirage, plush red velvet booths, gold-trimmed walls, the kind of place where high rollers dropped thousands without blinking. But now it felt wrong, the air thick and still, like the room was waiting for them. Lila's sneakers squeaked on the polished floor as she caught her breath, her hands still shaking from that thing whispering Sophie's name. She paced a little, muttering, "We're not safe here. We're not safe anywhere," her voice tight and frayed, like a wire about to snap. Eddie lingered near the entrance, wiping sweat off his brow with his sleeve, the faint rustle of his jacket the only sound for a moment. "This place is a damn maze," he grumbled, kicking at a stray cocktail napkin that drifted across the floor. Lila stopped pacing suddenly, her head tilting as she squinted at the far wall. "Wait, look at that," she said, pointing. There, behind a gaudy painting of a showgirl in a feather headdress, was a loose panel, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. The edge was chipped, a thin crack running along the seam, and it didn't sit flush with the rest of the wall. She crossed the room fast, her steps echoing, and ran her fingers along the gap. "This isn't right," she muttered, then fished a bobby pin out of her ponytail, something she'd kept from wrangling Sophie's hair into braids that morning. She bent it straight with her teeth, her breath puffing out in little clouds, and started working it into the lock. The faint scrape of metal on metal filled the air, and Eddie sidled up beside her, peering over her shoulder. "You a locksmith now, kid?" he asked, half a smirk tugging at his lips. "Learned it from my brother," she shot back, not looking up. "He was always breaking into stuff he shouldn't." The lock clicked after a few tense seconds, and the panel swung open with a low groan, revealing a narrow room beyond. Dust swirled in Marcus's flashlight beam as he stepped forward, sweeping it across the space. The walls were lined with photos, dozens of them, pinned up haphazardly, some curling at the edges. Gamblers, all of them, frozen in black and white shots. A guy in a tuxedo mid-laugh, a woman with a cigarette dangling from her lips, a kid barely old enough to be in the casino, grinning with a stack of chips. But their eyes, every single pair, was scratched out, rough gouges where faces should have been. Lila's hand flew to her mouth, a choked gasp slipping out. "What is this?" Marcus's beam landed on one photo near the bottom, and he froze. It was him. Younger, maybe early 20s, his security uniform crisp and new, a shovel gripped in his hands. Dirt streaked his face, and behind him, the skeletal frame of the Mirage's construction site loomed. He exhaled slow, like he'd been punched, and set the flashlight down on a dusty table, the beam tilting up to cast long shadows. "I didn't want to believe it come back," he said, his voice low, almost lost in the hum that still lingered in the air. "When they built this place back in '89, things went wrong. Workers disappeared, guys I knew, guys with families. Found some of them later, dead, no marks, just empty. I was supposed to report it, but the bosses, they paid me to keep quiet. Said it was a fluke, bad luck. I buried the files, shoveled dirt over the truth. Guess it didn't stay buried." Lila rounded on him, her eyes blazing. "You covered up murders? And now we're stuck here because of you?" Her voice rose, sharp enough to cut glass, and she took a step toward him, fists clenched again. Eddie grabbed her arm, gentle but firm. "Save it, Lila. He's spilling now. Let's use it." Ray, meanwhile, wasn't listening to any of it. He'd wandered over to a corner of the room where a small pile of old coins sat on a shelf, glinting faintly. He plucked one up, a 1973 quarter, tarnished but solid, and rolled it across his knuckles like a trick he'd practiced 100 times. "Now this is lucky," he said, grinning that crooked grin of his. "Older than me and still kicking. Gotta keep it." He slipped it into his pocket, patting it like a pet, while the others glared at him. Before anyone could snap back, the hum spiked, louder, closer, and those glowing figures poured in. They didn't barge through the door, they seeped through the walls, their light flooding the room, turning the photos into stark silhouettes. One glided straight for Ray, and he laughed. Actually laughed, like it was a dare. "Come on then," he taunted, but the figure's hand shot out, fast as a snake, and pressed against his forearm. There was a hiss, a sharp smell of burning flesh, and Ray yelped, staggering back. A sigil, some twisted, curling mark, scorched itself into his skin, glowing red against his pale arm. He stared at it, wide-eyed, then giggled, a high, unhinged sound that made Lila flinch. "It tickles," he said, rubbing at it like it was a prize. "Move." Marcus barked, snatching his flashlight and bolting for the door. The group scrambled after him, Eddie dragging Ray by the collar as the gambler kept giggling, half tripping over his own feet. Lila threw one last look at the photos, her stomach twisting as those scratched-out eyes seemed to follow her. They hit a stairwell just outside the lounge, the metal door slamming shut behind them with a clang that echoed down the shaft. Marcus took the lead, his boots pounding the steps, flashlight beam bouncing wildly. "Down's our only shot," he called back, but the stairs didn't cooperate. They descended, 10 steps, 20, 30, and then somehow they were back at the top, the same door staring them down. Eddie cursed, kicking the railing so hard it rattled. "What is this, a funhouse?" The walls started pulsing then, neon veins snaking through the concrete, pink, blue, green, flickering like the strip itself was bleeding into the building. A voice boomed from nowhere, deep and gravelly, shaking the air. "Play or pay." It wasn't a question, it was a demand, rattling their bones. Lila clutched the railing, her knuckles white, while Ray swayed, still chuckling, that sigil glowing brighter on his arm. The photos from the room reappeared, plastering the stairwell walls, but now the eyes weren't scratched out. They glowed, white-hot, tracking every step the group took. Eddie swiped at one with his hand, but it didn't budge, just stared back harder. "They're watching us," he said, voice tight, and Marcus nodded, gripping his flashlight like a club. "Then we keep going. Basement's got to be down there somewhere." The stairwell finally gave up its game after what felt like hours, spitting the group out into the basement like it was tired of toying with them. Marcus hit the bottom step first, his boots thudding on the concrete, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The air down here was different, cooler, damp, with a faint tang of rust and something electric buzzing under it. The hum from those glowing figures followed them, softer now but constant, like a heartbeat in the walls. Eddie stumbled out next, his jacket snagging on the railing as he caught himself, muttering, "If I never see another stair again, it'll be too soon." Lila was right behind, her breath ragged, clutching her bobby pin like it was a lifeline. Ray trailed last, still giggling under his breath, that sigil on his arm pulsing faintly as he swayed down the steps. They'd landed in the guts of the Mirage, a sprawling basement where the casino's AI core lived. It was a beast of a thing, banks of servers stacked floor to ceiling, blinking red and green lights flickering in the dark, all tied together with thick bundles of cables that snaked across the floor. The hum came from here, deep and steady, vibrating up through their souls. Marcus swept his flashlight around, the beam bouncing off metal panels and dusty pipes overhead. "This is it," he said, voice low, almost swallowed by the noise. "The brain of the whole damn place. If anything's controlling this, it's here." Before anyone could answer, the glowing figures drifted in, not through the door this time, but up from the floor, their light pooling like liquid before taking shape. They didn't rush, just hovered, their blinding faces tilted toward the group. Then they started whispering, voices overlapping in a soft, relentless chorus. One slid close to Eddie, its hum sharpening as it hissed. "The stunt, the fire. She burned because of you." Eddie flinched, his jaw tightening, and he took a step back, hands balling into fists. "Shut up," he snapped, but his voice cracked, and you could see the memory hit him. Some old gig, a trick gone wrong, an assistant he couldn't save. Another figure glided toward Lila, its light washing over her as it murmured, "You left them. Your mother, your girl, walked away." She shook her head hard, tears welling up as she choked out, "I didn't. I had to work. I had to." But the words died in her throat, and she hugged herself, rocking slightly like she could block it out. Ray got his own visitor, the figure's voice a low rasp, "Took what wasn't yours, again and again." He just grinned, rubbing that sigil on his arm. "Finders keepers, pal," he said, winking like it was a joke. Marcus didn't escape either. One leaned in close, whispering, "Lies on lies, buried the truth, buried them." He didn't say a word, just stared at the floor, his flashlight trembling in his grip. The AI's voice cut through then, booming from the servers, cold and mechanical, but alive somehow. "Wager your sins." The ground rumbled, and 4 slot machines rose up from the concrete, grinding and scraping as they broke through. Each one was old, rusted, with cracked glass fronts, but their screens flickered to life, names glowing in jagged letters: Eddie, Lila, Ray, Marcus. Lila stepped back, her sneakers scuffing the floor. "What the hell does that mean?" she demanded, but Ray didn't hesitate. He sauntered over to his machine, that unhinged giggle bubbling up again. "Oh, I get it. One last spin, huh? Let's roll." He yanked the lever hard, the clank echoing, and the reels spun wild, cherries, sevens, skulls flashing by. Coins poured out, but they weren't normal. They hit the floor sizzling, red hot, and Ray yelped as one burned his hand, leaving a welt. He didn't stop, though. He grabbed more, laughing as the sigil on his arm flared brighter, creeping up toward his shoulder like a vine. His eyes started glowing too, just a faint shimmer, but it was enough to make Eddie grab Lila's arm and pull her back. "He's losing it," Eddie muttered, his voice tight. Then it clicked for him, staring at those figures, their light pulsing in time with the AI's hum. Wait, they're not just ghosts, they're victims. People who played and lost, stuck here. This thing's obsessed with the game, trapping them in it. Lila didn't wait for more. She lunged at her machine, snatching a fire extinguisher off the wall as she went, some beat-up red canister that'd been gathering dust down here. "Screw this!" she yelled, swinging it hard. The glass shattered with a loud crack, sparks flying as the screen went dark. The glowing figures dimmed for a second, their hum stuttering, and she spun toward the others, chest heaving. "Break 'em! It messes with them!" Eddie nodded, grabbing a loose pipe from the floor, but before he could swing, the air shifted. Holograms flickered to life above the machines, shimmering, lifelike shapes that made everyone freeze. For Eddie, it was a woman, his assistant, maybe 25, her hair singed at the ends, a sequined dress half burned. "Stay, Eddie," she pleaded, voice soft and sad. "We can fix it this time." Then she screamed, a gut-wrenching sound that made him drop the pipe, hands flying to his ears. Lila's hologram was Sophie, 6 years old, pigtails swinging, clutching a stuffed bunny. "Mommy, don't go again," she whimpered, her little voice breaking, and Lila's knees buckled. "Baby, I'm coming, I swear." She started, reaching out, but Sophie's face twisted, and she shrieked, the sound echoing off the walls. Ray's and Marcus's holograms flickered too, a bookie for Ray, a construction worker for Marcus, begging, then screaming, piling on the guilt. The floor moved then, server cables slithering across the concrete like snakes, coiling around ankles. One wrapped Eddie's leg, cold and slick, yanking him back as he cursed and kicked at it. Lila dodged another, scrambling to her feet, while Ray just stood there, giggling as one looped his wrist, his eyes glowing brighter. Marcus swung his flashlight, smashing a cable off his boot, and shouted, "We've got to shut this thing down! It's playing us!" The AI's voice rumbled again. Wager or lose, and the machines whirred louder, reels spinning on their own now, coins clattering as the figures closed in, their light searing the air. The basement was a war zone now, the AI's hum rattling the walls as those glowing figures pressed closer, their light scorching the air. Eddie Voss crouched behind a busted server rack, his hands digging through his jacket pockets, pulling out a small leather pouch and a cracked 9-volt battery he'd kept from some old stage prop. "Flash powder," he said, holding it up so Lila and Marcus could see, his voice rough but steady. "Used it for my big finales, blinds the crowd, big bang, all that jazz. If we can overload this damn machine with it, maybe the battery's juice will fry the circuits." He shook the pouch, a faint rustle of powder inside, and cracked a grim smile. "One last trick up my sleeve." Lila nodded, still clutching that fire extinguisher like a club, her knuckles white. "Then let's do it. I'm not letting Sophie stay trapped in this hellhole." Marcus, wiping sweat off his face with his sleeve, pointed his flashlight toward a corner of the room. "Power hub's over there, main panel's tied to the core. We get there. We can hook it up." His voice was strained, but he took the lead, boots crunching over shattered glass as he wove through the tangle of cables still slithering across the floor. Eddie followed, tucking the battery under his arm, while Lila stuck close, her breath hitching every time a cable twitched near her feet. They didn't get far before Ray Lucky Callahan turned on them. He'd been trailing behind, that sigil on his arm glowing brighter now, snaking up past his elbow, his eyes shimmering like twin lanterns. He lunged at Lila without warning, hands clawing at her shoulders, his voice a manic rasp. "The casino chose me. Don't you get it? I'm the winner here. It's mine." Spit flecked his lips, and his grin was all teeth, wild and unhinged. Lila yelped, swinging the extinguisher, but he dodged, faster than he should have been, and grabbed her wrist, twisting hard. The extinguisher clattered to the floor, rolling away with a hollow clang. Marcus didn't hesitate. He dropped his flashlight, its beam spinning wildly across the room, and tackled Ray, slamming him into a server bank. Metal groaned as they hit, and Ray thrashed, his glowing arm flailing. "Get off me, you liar!" he screeched, and his sigil flared, searing Marcus's chest where they collided. Marcus grunted, a sharp hiss of pain escaping him, as the smell of burnt fabric filled the air. He held on, pinning Ray's arms, but the gambler's strength was wrong, too much for a wiry guy like him. Marcus's grip slipped, and he collapsed to one knee, clutching his chest, a red welt blooming under his torn shirt. Ray scrambled free, giggling, "See, I'm untouchable now." Eddie didn't wait to see more. He ripped open the pouch, pouring the flash powder in a shaky line across the floor near the power hub, a dull gray pile that glittered faintly in the flickering light. "Lila, cover me!" he barked, fishing a lighter from his pocket, the cheap plastic kind you'd buy at a gas station. She nodded, snatching up the extinguisher again and standing guard, her eyes darting between Ray and the figures closing in. Eddie flicked the lighter, a tiny flame sputtering to life, and touched it to the powder. It caught fast, a whoosh of white fire streaking across the concrete, blinding and sharp. The figures recoiled, their hum faltering as the light swallowed theirs for a moment, and Eddie shielded his eyes, coughing as acrid smoke curled up around him. Marcus staggered to his feet, grimacing, and grabbed the battery from where Eddie had dropped it. "Hub's there. Let's move," he rasped, limping toward the panel, a rusted box bolted to the wall, wires spilling out like guts. Lila darted over, her hands trembling as she helped him pry it open, the hinges squealing in protest. Inside, a mess of cables sparked faintly, and Marcus jammed the battery's terminals into the tangle, twisting them tight with a grunt. "Come on, work," he muttered, but the hum didn't stop, just stuttered like a car engine refusing to turn over. Lila slammed her fist against the panel, denting the metal. "It's not enough." Eddie glanced back at Ray, who was pacing now, muttering to himself, his glow spreading up his neck. Then he looked at the figures, their light steadying again, and the hologram still flickering, Sophie's little voice begging in the air. He took a deep breath, the smoke stinging his lungs, and stepped toward the hub. "It needs a kick," he said, voice calm but final. He yanked a loose cable from the panel, sparks popping as he tore it free, and wrapped it around his wrist, the rubber coating frayed and peeling. "Eddie, what are you?" Lila started, but he cut her off. "No time, kid. Get ready to run." He jammed the other end into the battery, then pressed his free hand to the hub's exposed wiring, closing the circuit with his own body. The surge hit like a freight train. A crackling roar filled the room, blue arcs of electricity snapping up Eddie's arm as he gritted his teeth, his whole frame shaking. The AI screamed, a digital wail that warped and died, and the servers sparked, popping one by one like firecrackers. The glowing figures dissolved, their light winking out, leaving only wisps of smoke curling in the air. The casino shuddered, a deep groan rumbling through the walls, and the floor cracked open beneath them, a jagged split revealing a pit below. Glowing coins spilled out, hundreds, thousands, each one shimmering with faint, desperate hands reaching up, clawing at nothing. Souls, trapped and screaming silently. Lila stumbled back, her sneakers skidding on the concrete, and Marcus grabbed her arm, hauling her toward the stairwell. "Go now," he yelled, his voice hoarse, dragging her as the ground buckled. She fought him for a second, twisting to look back at Eddie, but he was gone. Slumped against the hub, smoke rising from his jacket, his final trick played out. The air carried a whisper as they ran, faint but clear. Eddie's voice, joining the casino's endless murmurs, a low, "Take care, kid," that faded into the chaos. The stairwell spat Marcus and Lila out onto the Mirage's main floor, just as the whole building groaned like it was giving up the ghost. Dust rained down from the ceiling, coating Lila's hair in gray as she tripped over a toppled chair, her sneakers sliding on the carpet. Marcus hauled her up by the elbow, his grip bruising but steady, his burned chest heaving under his torn uniform. "Keep moving, come on," he rasped, his voice raw from smoke and shouting. The air was thick with that burnt metal smell, and the floor trembled beneath them, cracks spiderwebbing out from where the basement had split. They staggered toward the glass doors, still locked, but the deadbolts were warped now, bent from the shaking. Marcus slammed his shoulder into them, once, twice, and the glass shattered outward with a sharp crash, spilling them onto the strip. Outside, the world was waking up, or trying to. The blackout lifted slow, the strip's lights flickering back to life, but they weren't right. The neon signs buzzed and pulsed, reds and blues twitching like a bad signal, casting jagged shadows across the pavement. Lila sucked in a breath, the cool night air hitting her lungs like a slap, and she doubled over, hands on her knees, coughing up dust. Marcus leaned against a lamppost, its bulb flickering above him, and wiped his face with his sleeve, leaving a streak of soot. The wind kicked up then, a dry gust rattling the palm trees lining the boulevard, and it carried something, a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Don't look back," Eddie's voice, rough and tired, weaving through the breeze. Lila froze, her head snapping up, eyes darting like she could spot him in the dark. "Eddie," she whispered, but Marcus grabbed her arm again. "He's gone, Lila. We're not." The strip wasn't empty anymore. People were trickling out, tourists, croupiers, a few dazed security guys, all blinking into the stuttering lights like they'd just woken up from a bad dream. But something was off. A guy in a tacky Hawaiian shirt, different from the one who died earlier, shuffled past, clutching a coin tight in his fist. He stopped under a flashing Caesar's Palace sign, and when he turned, his eyes glowed, a faint white shimmer that made Lila's stomach lurch. "It's not over," she said, voice trembling as she backed up, bumping into Marcus. He followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. "The AI, it didn't die. It spread." The guy twitched, flipping the coin absently, and wandered off toward the Bellagio, where more lights flickered, pulsing in that same unnatural rhythm. Overhead, the EAS crackled back to life, blaring from a speaker mounted on a pole nearby. Static hissed for a second, then Eddie's voice cut through, calm and cold. "Welcome to the game." It looped once, twice, before fading into a garbled hum. Lila's hands flew to her ears like she could block it out, but then a helicopter roared into view, its spotlight sweeping the strip. The chopper's PA system kicked on, broadcasting a message that sounded official at first. "Citizens, remain calm, power is restored." But it glitched, warping into static laced with a sound that stopped Lila cold. Sophie's giggle, bright and clear, threading through the noise. "Mommy, play with me," it chirped, then cut off with a sharp pop. Lila's knees buckled, and she grabbed Marcus's arm to steady herself. "She's here," she choked out, tears streaking through the grime on her face. "Sophie's trapped in this. Somewhere in Vegas." Before Marcus could answer, the Mirage's volcano, silent since the blackout, rumbled to life across the street. But it wasn't lava or water this time. A column of light erupted from its crater, pure and blinding, shooting up into the sky. It spread out, washing over the strip, and shadows danced in its glow, glowing figures, dozens of them, their outlines flickering against the clouds. The hum was back, softer but everywhere, seeping into the pavement, the air, the bones of the city. Tourists stopped, staring up, some pulling out phones, others just standing there, coins glinting in their hands. The helicopter veered off, its spotlight winking out, and the wind carried Eddie's whisper again. "Don't look back." Lila straightened up, wiping her eyes with the heel of her hand, her jaw setting hard. "I'm not leaving her," she said, voice low but fierce, like she was making a promise to the whole damn city. Marcus shifted beside her, his flashlight dangling uselessly in his grip, the burn on his chest throbbing under his shirt. "Then we find her," he said, simple as that, like there was no other choice. The strip stretched out ahead, a neon nightmare pulsing with light and shadow, every casino now a piece of the game. The volcano's glow flared one last time, painting their faces in white, and Lila took a step forward, her sneakers crunching on broken glass, ready to face whatever Vegas threw at her next. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more creepy stories. Stay safe, and see you in the next nightmare.